Sota Daf Yomi Sota, touching men and women. וכהן מניח את ידו מתחתיה. Here we have an opportunity to touch on this incredibly important, misunderstood area of halacha. Men and women who are not married to one another touching each other in non-amorous ways. So the two obvious areas are shaking hands as a formal greeting and medical. Whether it's a husband helping a wife who's a nida, or it's a doctor helping a woman who's obviously not his wife. Those are the big areas where these things come into play. And of course, in the short time that we have, the purpose of this shiur is not to give a psak halacha, but to open up the concept and to understand the principles and the range of flexibility or lack thereof, and to just get a sense of it. I'm happy to sit with anybody individually or in groups who want more practical and detailed guidelines as to how this works and what it is, particularly in the business world. But the purpose of this year is just to get the context and the framework. And the essence of it is just understanding how important, and we can see it today more than ever before, these halachas are clear to understand, how important the separateness of the sexes is and the maintenance of an unambiguous gender identity in the success of Jewish life. If that's not in place, the possibility of Jewish life continuing to thrive with the values and belief and practical systems that it does are very, very small. The two psukim that we deal with here is a pasuk from the parasha of Sota. The Kohen takes the korban from the woman, the mincha, and he waves the korban mincha and brings it to the mizbeach. And Rashi says there, they do it jointly. The Kohen and the Sota wave the mincha together. Her hands are above his hands, implying that he puts his hands under her hands. How does that work? And then we've got in the korban mincha later on, ידיו תביאנה את אישי השם, את החלב ואת החזה, יביאנה את החזה, להניף אותו תנופה להשם. Again, there's got to be a waving. שתהא יד הבעלים מלמעלה, והחלב והחזות נותנים בה. This is not talking necessarily about a woman, but there too there's a waving offering, and the Kohen has to put the Bailim, the owner of the korban, holds the korban, and the Yad HaKohen milamata, the Kohen's hand is under the owner's hand, umenifan, and together they do the hanafa. Our Gemara, Omele Rabbi Lozo, Rabbi Yoshaya Dedare, Rabbi Lozo said to the Rabbi Yoshaya who lived in his times, Lo tetiv akarach ad mefarshat lach la lahamilted. I won't let you sit down until you've explained this to me. Minayin mincha sota shituuna tzunufa. How do you know that the mincha that a sota, the flower offering that a sota brings, needs wavering? Says Gemara, Minalan, what are you talking about? Ve'inivkativ, it's a posuk. We've just learnt it. What are you asking? No, that's not what I'm asking. Bevaila minalan. How do you know that it's not only the Kohen who does the hanafa, but that the Bailim, the owner, which is the sota, the woman, also has to participate in the offering, because that's a complicated kind of relationship. The Kohen and the woman waving this offering together, it kind of doesn't fit into what one would expect. So the Gemara says, Atyala Mishlomim, we learn it from Shlomim. There it says the Kohen should take it from the woman's hand, and here it says the owner's hand has to be involved. The Kohen in both cases, Bailim in both cases. HaKetzad, how do you have the owner of the korban and the Kohen? Meniach yado tachat yedei haBailim umenif. The Gemara says very clearly, and the Mishnah says the same really. The Kohen puts his hand under her hand, the Bailim's hand. She is the Bailim, she's the owner, and together they wave. The Rambam brings this lahalacha and uses an interesting phrase, v'kohen meniach yado tachteha. And the Kohen puts his hand under her, or under hers, implying there's physical contact. And we see that implication is clear from the Yerushalmi, because on this Gemara the Yerushalmi says the following, and the Rambam uses the Yerushalmi's very wording. That's why I've highlighted both the Rambam's wording and the Yerushalmi. The Rambam is taking the wording from the Yerushalmi. He's not taking the wording from our Bavli. And you'll see why that's relevant. So if here we see, says the Yerushalmi, he takes it out of a regular utensil, puts it into a Beis HaMikdash utensil. The Kohen puts his hand under hers and he waves it. Ask the Gemara, Ve'ena davar ke'ur? That doesn't look right, that looks ugly. It's interesting, the aesthetics, there's halachic aesthetics. The word ke'ur means ugly, that looks ugly. It doesn't fit the scene. It doesn't fit. Answers the Gemara, maybe map, or no, they do it with a kerchief. They put a napkin between his hands and her hands, so there's no physical contact. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work. Now you've got a chatzitza, because there's got to be contact all the way through, from the mincha to the kli sharet, to the hand of the woman, to the hand of the kohen. There's got to be contact. If you separate it, that's a chatzitza. Or maybe kohen zaken, he says, you know what, you've got to use an old kohen who doesn't have a yetzer hara. He's already not interested in women, so you use an old kohen. Afilu tema yered, or you could even say, no, you can use a young kohen, she'ein yetzer hara matzui l'sha'ah, because it takes a few moments for the Yetzer Hara to get into action. And in the brief moment of putting his hands under her hands, there's no worry that there's any Yetzer Hara. So we see from the Yerushalmi, the concern of the physical contact is Yetzer Hara. That's very important, because we'll see it's a major machlokas in the Rishonim as to whether the issue of touching somebody who isn't a woman, who isn't one's wife, is tied to Yetzer Hara. Is that because where one's mind goes? Or is that just physical contact? It's not allowed. It makes no difference where your mind goes. From the Yerushalmi, we see that what we're worried about here is where the mind goes, and in a very brief interaction, we're not concerned. Says our Tosfos brings the Yerushalmi. וכהן מניח את ידו שאין יצר הרע מצויה לשעה. He brings that's how we come to the Yerushalmi, because our Tosfos on the page. You don't have to be a Baki in Yerushalmi. Our Tosfos brings the Yerushalmi. So our Tosfos would seem also to be holding that the Yerushalmi would claim that there's no worry about the Kohen touching the woman. Our Tosfos seems to hold that that's what the Gemara holds here as well. Tosfos in Kiddushin learns differently. Now remember, the Tosfos of different Masechtas are written by different Baalei Tosfos. And in the case of Sota and Kiddushin, it's two different schools of Baalei Tosfos. Sota, I've mentioned to you already, was the Ashkenaz school, was the German school of Baalei Tosfos. The Talmudim of the Klonimus family, that's one school of thought. The Tosfos of Kiddushin is quite a late Tosfos, written probably by the Talmud of Rabbi Yitzchak Ivra. The school of Ivra, there were three brothers who led the school of Ivra. That's at the end of the 13th century. So the Talmud of Rabbi Yitzchak Ivra is probably already early 14th century. So it's a late Tosfos. And this Tosfos in Kiddushin draws a lot from the Rash Mishantz. The Rash Mishantz is also French school and is the spiritual successor of the Ri. So you've got Rabbi Tam, the great father of Tosfos, the Ri, his nephew and successor, and then the Rash Mishantz, who follows that. Those are the key towering personalities of the French school of Tosfos. And the Tosfos in Kiddushin leans heavily on the Rash Mishantz, and you'll see why that's important. Tosfos in Kiddushin asks, V'hai avi chatzitza? What about chatzitza? Because the same sugya appears in Kiddushin. Aren't her hands a chatzitza between the Kohens because it's exeres hakosov debin and Kohen uvailim. It would normally be a chatzitza, but since that's how the Torah says it has to be, that's all right. It's exeres hakosov. Va'od yesh loma. This is important for us. Lo ma'irish Kohen meniach et yado tachat yad habaylim mamash. We're not saying the Kohen touches the woman's hands. Of course not. That's not what it means. That actually would be a chatzitza. The owner holds the pot at the top, and the Kohen holds it at the bottom. The Kohen does not come into contact with the woman. That's how Tosfos in Kiddushin understands the Gemara. Different from the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says it looks ugly, and the Yerushalmi doesn't say, no, they're not touching each other. The Yerushalmi says you're dealing with an old man, or even a young man, but it's quick. So clearly there's a divergence now between our Tosfos, which is the German school of Tosfos on Sota, who learns the Yerushalmi and the Bavli as being parallel. He puts them together. The Yerushalmi just expands. The Bavli doesn't go into it. And you've got the Tosfos in Kiddushin who holds that the machlokas Yerushalmi and Bavli. The Yerushalmi clearly holds that there is physical contact between Kohen and the woman and deals with it. And the Bavli holds that there's not, that she holds it at the top, he holds the pot at the bottom, and they don't touch each other. And here you've got the Rash Mishantz, which we've got on our Gemara, but the Rash Mishantz actually brings that. So you see Tosfos in Kiddushin following the Rash Mishantz that we've got here in Sota. On the V'od yesh lema, the second piece that I've underlined, Da'achi echi perusho deloi marish hakohen meniach yado tachat yada mamash, da'avi chatzitza rotzo lomar shekohen tofes avir hakli lemata v'habaylim ochzim lemala. They hold their hand under the kli, and the woman is holding it by the handles or by the side of the plate or the pot or whatever, the dish, whatever kli they're using. His hands are just almost touching the pot, but he's not supporting the pot. The Tosfos Shantz, the Rash Mishantz says they're not even holding the same object. She's holding the object and he's got his hands underneath it. And there's an energy that passes even though there's not physical energy. And that's how you see it in Bikurim, that it works like that and so on. The Tosfos Harosh, fascinatingly, tries to reconcile the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. And the Tosfos Harosh says, first from the Yerushalmi it seems that they touch each other, and that's different from our Gemara. Umiu matzina lemeimer afal pi sheyada kohen lamata bikli. Even if we learn like Tosfos like Rash Mishans, and like the Tosfos in Kiddushin. And we want to say, of course, there's no havamina that he's touching her hands. His hands are under the pot. Her hands are on the sides of the pot. So what's the Yerushalmi worried? That it looks kiur, it looks ugly? The Yerushalmi is worried about a mistake. It can happen that their hands slip, their hands touch each other, they move him up and down, and she doesn't know exactly where it goes, and he's got to move in sync with her, and they could touch each other unintentionally. That's what the Yerushalmi says. In such a small moment, the Yetzer Hara doesn't come. It's not an issue that you have to worry about. So brilliantly, the Tosfos Harosh brings the Yerushalmi and the Bavli together in a way where there's no suggestion that the Kohen touches the hands of the woman. The Shulchan Aruch is very, very strong on this. We've got many places in the Shulchan Aruch that even a man, and when his wife is a nida, he can't take care of her even to help her sit down or stand up. Further on, if the husband's a rofe, a doctor, he can't feel her pulse, he can't touch her. The Ramah learns differently, and the Ramah says that based on the Rambam, if it's professional or it's formal, it's not amorous, it's not sensual, then certainly you can do it. If there's nobody else to do it, you can certainly do it. So it goes through the Rishonim and comes right to the Mechaber and the Ramah as to whether there's absolutely no, it's an Isur D'Oraisa. According to the Mechaber, it's an Isur D'Oraisa. You can't touch the woman. It doesn't matter what you're thinking or not thinking or feeling or not feeling. Can't be done. According to the Ramah, if it's professional and it's not amorous and it's not sensual, it can be done if there's a need to do it. The Shach, in two places, we've got it in Yoredeh, Siman Kuf Nun Zayin, and again in Kuf Tzadi He. It says very clearly that according to the Rambam, Leka Isur D'Oraita ela k'sheoseh kein derech ta'ava v'chibat bi'ah. There's only an Isur D'Oraisa if there is a sensual or an affectionate intention in that contact. If there isn't, then it's a D'Rabbanan. Now, why that's very important is because that opens the possibilities of what do you do if a woman puts her hand out in public and you're not going to shake her hand. So if it's a D'Oraisa, there's nothing you can do. You've got to just explain to her, sorry, can't do it. If it's a D'Rabbanan, now you can work. And I've seen a very great tzaddik, and I've heard in the name of other great Talmidei Chachamim, that where there's absolute halbanat panim, you would disgrace the woman, you would shame the woman. That halbanat panim, l'olam yapil adam atzmo lekivshan ha'esh v'lo yalbim pnei chaveiro berabim. You should rather kill yourself than it's a yahareg v'al ya'avor, rather than to cause a person shame. And if this is a D'Rabbanan, then there are many tzaddikim and Talmidei Chachamim who, if there's no option, what can you do? I'm not going to embarrass the woman. They'll take the woman's hand and they'll shake it. But many will not, because right through the poskim until today, there's a lack of clarity about this. And what's important to understand is that the ikar halacha, the halacha itself is it's clear. You can't do it. You can't shake a woman's hand. That is the halacha. Now you could try and work. Are there situations where if there's no way out, you can, you can't, but you've got to start with the starting place is no physical contact. And the fact that today physical contact is taken so lightly isn't good for genders. It's not good for the sexual relationships between men and women because it dilutes the energy of separateness. Polarity creates energy. We've spoken about that before. You need a positive and you need a negative, and then you can have electricity between them. You need male and you need female. And you can imagine in a society where male and female have very little contact, if any at all, a handshake is enormously explosive in terms of its meaning and its subtlety and its feelings. Today it's just kind of wachadik. You do it all the time, so you don't feel it. But that's not an advancement in society. That's a degradation of society, that we've lost that excitement of barrier between man and woman that is broken or overcome only in marriage, and that's what marriage is. That ability to be excited about the intimacy of marriage requires separateness of gender outside of marriage. How separate? Well, how do you draw a line? Now you say, well, you can shake somebody's hand if it's only for 10 seconds or 5 seconds or 1 second, but not for 3 seconds. Where do you place the barrier? So it's much easier to place the barrier and just say no physical contact. That's the easiest place to take the barrier, easiest to explain and easiest to be able to fulfill. And that's where you see the poskim are. There's a beautiful Sefer HaChinuch where he says, don't try and think, but you don't have a Yetzer Hara, or you're too old, or the woman's too ugly, or bring proofs from the Chachomim in the Gemara. Don't go there. Just keep the separateness. And it's a beautiful Sefer HaChinuch piece in the Chinuch in Mitzvah Kuf Pei Ches that it's worthwhile learning through. So again and again you see the Poskim and the Rishonim and the Achronim emphasizing that is the halacha. That's what the halacha is. The accommodations are b'diavad. What can you do? But we need to know what the halacha is. Even Reb Moshe Feinstein, Paskins, and now he knows American life, and he's pasking this already in the 1960s. He says in Orach Chaim, Pashut she'asur, af lipnuya. You can't even shake the hand of an unmarried woman because she has the din of a nidah. Even that you can't have. And he says later on in time and in Shulchan Aruch, but there are people you see, Talmidei Chachomim, who do shake hands. He says maybe maybe they rely on the Ramah, that this is not the way of, there's no amorous and affection involved in it, and therefore they're matir in a situation where they might embarrass somebody. And again in Even Oezer Chelik Dalet he says, much later on again, clearly, vaday hu poshut she'osur. The starting point is it's osur, and he goes on why. But nevertheless, when you know that there are Yorei Shemayim who do it, sheyesh ladun lekav zchut, you should accept these Yorei Shemayim who do it. Desomchim liten kashi mushita lahem. If she puts out her hand first, they rely on it. Shelo yaselu derech chiba v'tava. Since they don't want to embarrass the woman, and it's just a formal moment of interaction, they don't want to embarrass the woman. But anyway, our Tosfos and the Tosfos in Kiddushin and the Tosfos Harosh are one of the pivots of this whole sugya. And again, according to our Tosfos, there's no difference. The Yerushalmi and the Bavli both agree that there is contact between Kohen and woman. And is that because it's derech mitzvah or because it's just a brief moment? The Gemara goes into. The Tosfos in Kiddushin, there's a machlokes Yerushalmi and Bavli. And they're different. The Yerushalmi holds there is contact, the Bavli holds there isn't contact. Tosfos Harosh reconciles them and says clearly there's no contact. What the Yerushalmi is worried about is unintentional contact. And that we're not worried about in that particular situation, but intentional contact, there certainly shouldn't be. In Shulchan Aruch, we see that it's clear, according to the Mechaber, there's a Doraisa, according to the Ramah, it's a Derabonin. Since it's a Derabonin, if it's medical or there's a reason to support a woman, there's nobody else there to do it, of course you need to do it, according to the Ramah. The Shach Paskins like the Ramah, and Moshe Feinstein Paskins clearly the principle is it's also, but there are people and situations and times where people are matter if it's just a formality and clearly not an expression of affection or any sensuality.